Hello everyone and welcome back to AustinPlus, where today we are answering quite a controversial question in terms of big hero villains, and it is between the two big bads of both Marvel and DC. It's Thanos and Darkseid. Now, when people debate the greatest comic book villains, two names basically always come up: Thanos and Darkseid. But both have conquered worlds, challenged entire superhero teams, and threatened existence itself. But being powerful doesn't necessarily make it someone the bigger villain. So who truly deserves that title? To answer that, we need to look obviously their strength, they're comparing their motivations, philosophies, methods, and obviously the lasting impact that they have on their respective universes. So in saying all that, today we are answering the question, who is the bigger villain? Thanos or Darkseid? Two of, as I said, the greatest comic book villains ever. The reason I don't say movies is because they're not the greatest, because we've barely had any. So without further ado, let's get into it. To start, obviously, both of these characters have two very different objectives and what drives both of these villains, because although both seek ultimate power, their motivations couldn't be any more different, because Thanos is driven by a twisted belief that suffering can be prevented through balance, often convincing himself that his actions serve a greater good. The Darkseid, however, has no interest in saving anyone. His sole objective is complete domination, seeking to eliminate free its will itself through the anti-life equation. One believes that his atrocities are necessary, while the other embraces evil as the natural order of existence. So setting the tone now, they are very different, but obviously their size and then their comparison, they are very similar in terms of impact. Conquest is a big thing for both of these characters, and I'd say that both of their methods are, as I said again, very different, but it often can be. It just depends, really, because Thanos often relies on strategy, manipulation, and obviously an overwhelming force, assembling armies or pursuing artifacts like the Infinity Stones to accomplish his goals. However, his power campaigns usually have a clear objective, after which he steps away from his power. Darkseid does rule very differently, however, because he is a tyrant. He is the tyrant of Apocalypse. Oppression is not a means to an end, it's the end itself. Apocalypse is a very good interpretation of what the people say is hell. His empire exists to enslave civilizations indefinitely, making conquest a very permanent condition rather than a temporary victory. I would say, having been in that he obviously being in a place like Apocalypse, he's driven to be that oppressor and wanting that permanent victory and all of this. So I would say, in terms of conquest, Darkseid is one far more consistent and also far more demanding than Thanos is. That also brings me to my next point, which is their scale of evil, because Thanos has an objective, Darkseid doesn't. He is just the personification of villainy and evil, because both villains have committed unimaginable atrocities, don't get me wrong, but their impact definitely differs in the scope, because Thanos has wiped out billions of lives in pursuit of what he sees as the universal balance, while Darkseid has spent countless ages subjugating entire worlds, destroying cultures, and spreading fear across the DC universe. Now, Thanos creates devastation through singular catastrophic events such as the Snap, whereas Darkseid actually builds systems designed to perpetuate suffering forever. So, does Darkseid basically long-term plan, Thanos short-term? As much as we understand their characters, the other side of this is understanding their impact on the opposing team, such as the heroes, the Justice League, the Avengers. Thanos is often portrayed as the ultimate physical and intellectual threat, forcing heroes to basically overcome impossible odds through sacrifice and teamwork. However, Darkseid is a completely other end of that. Darkseid presents a different challenge entirely. He represents absolute tyranny, testing not only a hero's strength, but also their ability to preserve hope, freedom, and individuality. That's why he's obviously got as an army, as I say, to help him with that conquest. I think fighting Darkseid is often less about defeating one enemy and more about resisting the ideology that he seeks out to erase the identity itself. The anti-life equation plays a big part in his conquest. However, he just wants pure evil, so he's trying to use that anti-life equation for pure evil. But obviously, Thanos, after he did his job, he was more than willing to let go and say, I'm gonna go and harvest my own, like, what do you call it, crops now. Avengers were vengeful, obviously, in the bloody name, but Darkseid will not stop. That's why he's such a very, like, oppressive character. I think both of these characters can be both very complex, but one does stand out, and I have kind of hinted out who's the more, like, complicated one and who's the more philosophical one. One of Thanos' greatest strengths as a character is his complexity. I would say, depending on the storyline that you are interpreting of, he can be portrayed as philosophical, emotionally conflicted, or even capable of regret, making him a compelling antagonist whose reasoning can appear understandable despite being deeply flawed. However, Darkseid is intentionally different. He is less of a tragic figure, but more of a living embodiment, as I've said this multiple times, of oppression and absolute evil. Darkseid has no, like, other side. He is... I hate that I'm about to say this, but the dark side.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
This takes away from that humanity. He is less human. Thanos has some sort of good in him, but he is so clouded by his own ideology and his thoughts that he cannot actually access that until after his objective. However, Darkseid does it, knowing what he's doing, plans it, and still does it anyway. And that is, I think, far less human and far more mythological, and you could probably argue philosophical as well. I think the biggest thing in both of these characters is their influences on their universe, the influence on the Marvel and the DC universe. While Thanos has repeatedly reshaped Marvel's history through events involving the Infinity Stones, the Gauntlet, Cosmic Wars, and then obviously universe-altering conflicts, Darkseid's influence definitely extends beyond individual stories, serving as one of the obviously foundations forces of evil within DC's obviously mythology. His existence affects gods and multiversal events, and even like the nature of free will itself. I think it makes him a bit more of a consistent presence rather than an occasional catastrophic threat, because Thanos even, in the MCU, his objective was to wipe out the universe, half of the universe. That was it. Darkseid would say, oh, Monday I'm gonna wipe out half the universe, Tuesday, let's go and raid that planet, Wednesday, should we take a day off? Nah, right, okay, what we're gonna do is maybe reorganize Apocalypse. That is how he works. He will not stop. He is a workaholic, some may say. So, in saying all of that, who is the bigger villain? The answer ultimately depends on how you interpret villainy and how it is defined. But in my opinion, Darkseid. Darkseid is the greatest villain in, and he is one of the most capable of causing the most, like, immediate destruction. And obviously, Thanos can be a bit more morally complex. I think that in terms of a character, he stands above Darkseid. But if true villainy means embodying oppression, tyranny, and complete destruction of freedom across generations, Darkseid arguably surpasses that. I think one is a conqueror who has a warped purpose, the other is a living personification of evil, and if that doesn't give you the idea of villainy, then I don't really know what will. Thanos may have delivered some of the most devastating moments in comic book history and cinema history, but Darkseid represents something even more terrifying, the idea that freedom itself can be erased forever. One wants to reshape the universe, the other wants to own it. And that's why this debate remains one of the greatest in comic book history, but the answer is objectively obvious. But without further ado, folks, that is the end of today's video. I do hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe and comment what else you would like to see on this channel. But I hope you have an amazing day as always, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.
Yeah.